Hello, you're watching the TelecomTV Summit on Telcos and Public Cloud and our panel discussion on the best use cases for telco and public cloud partnerships. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV. So what lessons have we learned? What best practices can be identified? And how can telcos and cloud providers create optimal working partnerships for the future? We're going to address some of the key issues that arise from TelecomTV's ongoing editorial coverage of the public cloud. And joining us on the programme today are Francesca Serravalle, Emerging Technology Director at Colt Technology, Paul Brittain, Principal Product Manager at Azure for Operators at Microsoft, Beth Cohen, SDN Product Strategies at Verizon, and Ranny, Haiby, CTO Networking, Edge, IoT and Access at the Linux Foundation. Hello everyone, very good to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part in our discussion. First question I'd like to ask, very simply, where should telco public cloud partnerships start? Is there now an obvious first port of call for such relationships that can help set the foundations for the future? Beth, I wonder if we could start with your views on this first.
So I'd like to talk about, I don't think there's a single port of call. Our experience is, we've made partnerships with all the major hyperscalers over the last few years. And, each one is a little bit different. So, but there are some commonalities. One thing is you need to think about the relationship. Is it a partnership? Is it a seller relationship? Is it is the relationship a co-sell or is it a sell with, sell to? All of those are things that you do need to take into consideration when you're thinking about, as a telco, partnering with the hyperscalers. We also find that the hyperscalers, I'm speaking from a telco perspective, hyperscalers tend to have a somewhat different focus of their objectives. So, telcos, let's see, at the end of the day are really, we're selling pipes and network services and all sorts of things that are related to the WAN, while hyperscalers tend to focus on development platforms, and platforms that are supporting a different set of end users.
Great, thanks very much, Beth. And Francesca, continuing the perspective from the telcos, what do you think? Is there a first port of call, if you like, that can help set the foundation for these relationships?
Thanks for the question. I agree with Beth. The recent clear start, it really depends on internal priority and the business strategy, because there are so many areas of synergy and collaboration with the hyperscaler. One area is hyperscaler helping us, a service provider, into our digital journey. For example, executing on our data strategy, breaking silo, helping with an API-centric approach to share data, and enabling new ways of working and collaboration. They can help us also to transform our OSS and BSS stack in cloud native, and that will simplify the journey from a present mode of operation to a target mode of operation. And another area of synergy is to help service provider to become a catalyst of digital transformation for enterprise. And in that case, we can bring the edge. We can bring the connectivity bundle with the distributed telco cloud of hyperscaler, and helping then enterprise creating innovative IoT services. And then the third area is where hyperscaler, they can help service provider to realize the telco vision, because as we know, they're building marketplace and orchestration capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Francesca, for that. Well, let's switch over and get the other perspective on this relationship. Paul, from your point of view, is there a first port of call here to commence these relationships?
Thanks, Guy. Well, I think Beth and Francesca said it very well. I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that they said in their introductions. First off, is the carriers need to think beyond the obvious core networks that everybody concentrates on in telco. I'm certainly guilty of that myself because they're big, interesting global networks. But actually, in many cases, the first port of call is more likely to be in platform spaces, building new applications, especially in the observability and analytics space. And then growing into more of the core network strategies as the carrier gets more comfortable with the use of public cloud hyperscale resources for complex projects, having built on that expertise that they're getting from building out analytics, AI-based ops, for example. Francesca also mentioned enterprise services. I think that's a hugely exciting area where just the hyperscale name gives a clue, plus the way that we work, all the hyperscalers, so closely with all the enterprises, a lot of synergy there for the carriers to exploit as well. So lots of opportunities, not just the sort of headline core networks that everyone might think of first when you mention the word telco.
Great, yeah, thank you, Paul. As you said, lots of entry points here. Some good ideas and thoughts there from our guests. Well, let's develop this train of thought and move on to another question. I'd like to ask, and perhaps, Ranny, we could start by asking you, are there any particular skills or tools that telcos are looking for as they evolve their telco cloud virtualization, open architectures and 5G strategies?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when we talk about this type of integration between the operators and the public cloud providers, you need, first of all, to have a high degree of automation, and people are trying to deploy things like CI/CD and the relevant technologies. So that means you'll have to have kind of a uniform way to deploy things across a cloud provider and a telco in a kind of a seamless way that is fully automated end to end. And this calls for wide use of APIs to make sure that everything can be deployed anywhere, regardless of whether it's on the telco edge or centrally by the hyperscale cloud providers. It also calls for, and we're seeing a trend towards a more cloud native architecture, where we are trying to use proven technologies that were used for hyperscaling in telecom and apply those same technologies. So there's a high demand of expertise and technology around this cloud native architecture and how it could be applied to telco services.
Great, thanks very much for those comments, Ranny. We're certainly seeing a lot of interest in the cloud native tools and methodologies. API is getting more and more prominent and more important. So let me come across first of all to Francesca for some additional views here.
Yeah, thanks. So we're very focused on realizing our telco cloud vision, and this is why we are, upskilling our software skills to replicate the software development lifecycle using, agile methodology, DevOps, CI/CD, and that because, as we build the marketplace of virtualized network services to cloudify the experience of provisioning network services, what we really want to do is to become more reactive to market changes and to customer requirement, as well as to innovate our offering. So we're very focused on API, building API between our on-demand platform and also the cloud platform to enable application performance, as we realized our enterprise are moving into the cloud, also business critical workload.
Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, thanks, Francesca. And Beth, thoughts from you about the tools and the skills that telco is looking for here?
Yes, I'd like to pick up on some of what Francesca said and sort of take it another level. APIs are very important, and it's not just internal APIs for integrating, with applications that are in the cloud that are supported by the hyperscalers, but it's also APIs to share with our customers. And what we're finding is that it's important to provide a let's say, call it an API layer that allows us to interface with multiple vendors. So traditionally we've been doing all the heavy lifting of doing the integration of the vendor APIs into our own systems to then share them with our customers. But increasingly, we're finding that we need to build an interface layer, an API interface, if you will, that allows both the vendors and our customers to pull the information they need, or in the case of the vendors, provide the information from their set of APIs. And then on our customer side, our customers can use these APIs to pull the information that they need into their own systems. So we're finding that as a telco, we're playing a critical role in exposing critical data about customers' networks and vendor information, or rather their network services information that gets incorporated into customers' systems that are monitoring their applications. And the cloud, of course, is the common element across all of these.
Great, thanks very much, Beth. Well, in that case, I think maybe we will move on to our next question, because this kind of leads on from what we've been talking about here. And I'd like to ask is, through these partnerships, are we seeing any new innovation, any unexpected relationships or ways of doing business as a result of having these new relationships? Ranny, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so first of all, for us in the open source community, these relationships are not so new. We've seen operators, equipment vendors, cloud providers, hyperscalers collaborating in the open source arena for at least several years now. But we are seeing some nice things emerging out of that collaboration. We are kind of seeing how technologies that were tried and proven in the hyperscale domain are now applied to telco. We just seen a recent project being contributed by Google Cloud, which is related to how you deploy network services and how you use well-known technologies like Kubernetes API to enable managing and deploying and running the lifecycle of network services. And this is kind of one example of how technologies that were coming from the hyperscalers with little twists and tweaks are being adjusted to address the needs of telco and kind of let telco services benefit from all the advantages that were developed for kind of cloud scaling or hyperscaling applications. And we're seeing that work really nicely. So we have a few ongoing projects and this new project called Nephew that I just mentioned, which shows how these tricks that were successfully deployed in the hyperscaling world can be used to accelerate the telco services.
Thanks, Ranny. And as you rightly said, there's been collaboration and close working relationships, especially in the open source community between telcos and enterprises and cloud providers for quite some time now. Paul, are you seeing any new innovation as a result of these closer partnerships we're getting?
Yes, Guy, thank you. And leading on from the previous question as well, I think there are two key areas here. The CI/CD that was mentioned, plus the orchestration capabilities that Ranny just mentioned, both really important. I like to characterize that as sort of safe deployment practices across global, fleet-wide management problems, which is exactly the issue where the hyperscalers are bringing insights and experience that are many years ahead of where telcos have had to be up to now, because telcos have had different operating models, and different physical-based systems that needed different technologies, whereas the level of automation, which is both good and bad in this context, is changing very fast. So much quicker innovation is possible using these sorts of tools. But as ever, innovation and speed brings a need to really concentrate on security. So I think there'll be a huge emphasis on the adoption of latest sort of zero trust models across all of telco, especially as they move towards the hyperscale environment, because of the attack surface that can potentially be opened up there that they're not familiar with. Indeed, there's a number of regulatory areas that different jurisdictions are looking at in that space. So all of those come together to needing strong processes and APIs and a lot of analytics to back it all up so you can see what's going on. Exactly the sort of problems that the hyperscalers are used to solving, and telco can build on that and use all that expertise.
Great, thank you, Paul. It's always good to hear of a heightened focus on security. Francesca, some thoughts from you on innovation and partnerships?
Yeah, if I can, I would like to elaborate on our co-innovating with hyperscaler. Our vision is to be able to work with hyperscaler to create ICT stack, and that will enable us to be part of strategic initiative from enterprise and address business and operational challenge rather than just a connectivity challenge. And this is what we are doing, for example, with IBM, where we're using our customer edge to host their IBM satellite, their distributed cloud, to enable a platform business model where enterprise can build some use case on top. We're also bundling this proposition with IBM application to really deliver use case like IoT telemetry, visual inspection, integrated value chain. And this is not just a co-innovation opportunity, but there is a clear path to monetization through a clear joint value prop where we join the expertise to address productivity challenge, inefficiency, but most of all, breaking operational silos. We are currently doing, we are in an incubation activity where we are really proving the end-to-end solution, but also joint GTM and joint business. So hopefully we will be able to share some news soon.
Well, we look forward to hearing more from that. Thanks, Francesca. And Beth, some additional thoughts from you here?
Yes, I'd like to talk about a lot of the telcos, and certainly this is true for Verizon, have taken have used innovation in the cloud space to drive innovation within its operational space. So software-defined networking has really revolutionized how we deliver our services and how we support our services. It has driven automation to new levels that we've never seen before. It's not that telcos don't understand automation. I mean, we've been doing automation for decades, but software-defined networking allows us to take that automation to, orders of magnitude more. And I think we're going to see more and more innovation as we get into intelligent networking over the next couple of years. So I'm very excited about that area, and I see that a lot of the architectures that the hyperscalers have developed over the years are now being applied within the telco space. And I see that, I see that every day, particularly within our operations groups, but also with our customers as well. Our customers are demanding more information about their networks, more analytics, more, just basic information about how their networks work that I don't think they would have considered if they weren't familiar and using the cloud providers which have those tools in place.
Thank you, Beth. Well, let's move on now and talk about these architectures. And there seems to be a lot more visibility coming out on networks now, maybe as a result of some of these new partnerships. Only a couple of months ago, for example, AWS published a very, very detailed report on what it's doing with Dish and its 5G network in the US. So in a way, we can all see a blueprint for what an all-in public cloud hosted 5G network could look like. So Could this or something similar from other players be the template for more networks around the world? Is this the ultimate use case, I wonder? Paul, from your perspective there, Microsoft, is it useful to have very detailed publications of what these new architectures can look like? Is there a way forward here?
So thank you, Guy. Yeah, obviously it's always useful for everyone to see different perspectives on how things can be built. The concept of moving an entire telco into public cloud is a hugely interesting topic. But I think actually the correct answer is it depends. There will be some services, and in particular some jurisdictions, where that's harder. Because, for example, there are geographic constraints or regulatory requirements around local survivability that just can't be met from the number of regions that any of the hyperscalers, not just Azure, but Amazon or Google, they all have in some jurisdictions too few locations. And that's why I think what we'll actually end up seeing is a combination of some architectures, like the one you gave the example of, where particular services, things like voicemail, things like enterprise services that we were just discussing, they can move very effectively into core. But when you get into the need for, say, voice and data services on a distributed island nation, North and South Island in New Zealand or Philippines or places like that, or even just many parts of the world outside of North America, then there is a continued need for a sort of edge platform in addition to just the public cloud regions. You saw some announcements, for example, Barcelona. We launched the Azure Operator Distributed Service to give exactly that sort of solution. So there will still be a need for that sort of hybrid edge plus core deployment for certain services in order to meet both the regulatory requirements and the expectations coming from the public. Other services, especially in the enterprise space, more the IoT, edge compute type space, definitely those can move into the cloud. But again, for latency reasons, may need edge resources as well. So as ever, one size fits all actually doesn't quite fit all. And you're going to need a variety of different architectures to suit the particular problem that you need to solve.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It never does it? One size never fits all. And Beth, it's quite simplistic saying here's a blank sheet of paper, let's draw the network and then rinse and repeat, globally wherever we want to be. But it's a much more complex picture, I guess.
It is a much more complex picture. And I'll speak from, a telco that has, we have wireless networks, we have 5G networks of all, wireless of all different flavors. We have wireline, we have private networks, we have, we work with our telco peers. So we have a global network and, some of it we own, some of it we don't. It's a very complex picture. And there's a lot of services that make sense to move into the hyperscalers. As Paul mentioned, email. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but some of the more complex services don't make a huge amount of sense to move into the hyperscaler, or at least maybe move part of it. For example, there are many regulatory requirements and security requirements, geopolitical requirements for keeping information in-house or in country. For example, we were required to do what's called CALIA in the United States. Doesn't apply outside of the United States. So we need to make sure that certain data has to remain inside the United States, which obviously is well served by the hyperscalers, but they don't have the same regulatory requirements that we have. So I think at the end of the day, absolutely some of the services will move into the hyperscalers and some of them will remain within our own infrastructures. And of course there's business. We're also going to look at the business reasons, right? Costs. We're large enough so that cost-wise, moving into the hyperscalers does not necessarily save us a large amount of money. So there's usually other reasons why we move into hyperscalers besides, the cost savings, which is, often touted by the cloud providers. Flexibility, absolutely. But again, we typically have pretty large footprints. And network services tend to be, pretty steady state in terms of the resource requirements. So the elasticity, that the hyperscalers offer is less attractive than it might be to, other types of applications and companies.
Thank you very much, Beth. And Ranny, let's head across to you for your views on this.
Yeah, so you asked about this blueprint coming from AWS and Dish, and I like to plug our very own 5G super blueprint that we're creating in the Linux Foundation. But what I like to say is that these are all blueprints, as the name suggests. You don't have to take them lock, stock, and barrel and just deploy them as is. It's just, I see them as kind of food for thought, proof of concept that anybody, any network architect or decision maker can look at and decide what works for them and what doesn't work exactly the same way for them. I know the AWS one is very specific about the topology of the data center and about specific tools for CI/CD, but I'm not expecting anyone to adopt it just to the letter. I think that they serve a great purpose in showing a kind of a proof of concept and showing people how things might be done, and everybody is expected to adapt that to their use cases and limitation. Beth mentioned specific lawful requirements in the US, then some things may be tweaked to address that. So I think, yeah, it's a good that we have these blueprints and proof of concept, but everybody is expected to start from that and adapt that to their own needs.
Okay, thanks very much, Ranny, and thanks for, as you say, your the 5G Super Blueprint, which Linux Foundation Networking has been developing for some time now. I'd like to move on, Francesca, and come to you and ask you about how best use case partnership examples differ between different types of operators. It can't surely be the same for fixed line telcos compared with mobile operators and cable operators and business operators, for example.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I agree. It cannot be the same because internal priorities are different. Mobile operators are currently very busy rolling out their 5G network. So they're currently leveraging the hyperscaler partnership more to enable their network transformation program, but they're also busy on protecting and acquiring their consumer base. So I think we're seeing announcement announcement that aims to monetize the eMBMB capability of 5G, like for example through cloud gaming or solution like Smart Stadium. For us, fixed operators is different. We're very much focused purely on the enterprise, starting or working with the hyperscaler to enable platform business model, but also to build on top of this platform innovative use case.
Thank you, Francesca. Beth, you just mentioned your previous answer. You were alluding to the fact that Verizon has different business units here. So do you see the same thing, that these partnerships with public cloud providers are different depending on what use you're going to put them to?
Very much so. We've done a number of partnerships. An early one, which was done a few years ago, is Secure Cloud Interconnect, which was mostly used. It's mostly used by businesses and enterprises to connect private networks to cloud providers. And we made partnerships with the major cloud providers, and plus some of the SaaS providers as well. So we made connection to SAP HANA and Salesforce as well. So and those were, that was an early partnership with the cloud providers, but it was very much focused on the enterprise and business. But then, since then, we've made, partnerships related to, Mac, mobile edge computing, both public and private Mac, and, private Mac is obviously mostly an enterprise play as well, but public Mac is not. Public Mac has the opportunity to be used, by consumers, right? So applications that are built on top of the public Mac partnerships, gaming, for example, we've already announced some gaming applications, stadiums, as Francesca mentioned, entertainment. Those are very much consumer oriented. So there's no one size fits all, and even within Verizon, there's no one size fits all.
Thanks, Beth. Well, I think we've got time to fit in one quick final question, open to any one of you here. When might we see the emergence of a new breed of digital service provider, DSP category of operator, as a direct result of more mature telco and public cloud relationships? So the question is, as these relationships develop, get more mature, could we start to see a new breed of DSP emerge and be part of the competitive landscape? Anyone want to have a thought about that scenario? Yeah, okay, let's go to Ranny first.
Yeah, so from the technology perspective, I think a lot of what we do in the open source communities are reaching a certain level of maturity these days that we're starting to feel confident that it is ready for prime time, or ready for being used for real live use cases. So I think from the technology perspective, we can now say confidently that we have the right technology. Whether how long it will take for the business side to mature, that's still for us to see. But I think from a technology, we've seen a lot of maturity come along in recent years and even months. So we feel confident about the technology right now.
Good to hear. Thanks, Ranny. And Paul, what do you think to this one?
Thanks, Guy. It's already happening. So we've discussed examples like Dish. Everyone knows about Geo and Rakuten and so on. So that's where there's sort of technology change, but there's also fundamental business focus change happening for some organizations out there. Some pushing much harder towards the sort of enterprise use cases, more private MEC or IoT, specialized IoT, global carriers emerging. It's all very novel. I think one of the areas that is going to see most innovation, though, over the next couple of years is going to be in the space of analytics and AI, and the new opportunities that presents to telcos of all shapes and sizes, whatever segment they specialize in. They're going to have new ways of optimizing the service, making use of 5G slicing and all those new capabilities that are coming in. Should be an interesting time.
Well, it certainly should be. Thanks very much, Paul and Beth.
So what I agree with Paul. There's already new providers emerging. I'll use an example, Cato Networks, which their focus is, it's an SD-WAN SASE solution, but their focus is on building a really easy to use portal, which of course is something that the hyperscalers have excelled at, and it's not something that the telcos have been very good at. Portals are hard to build, particularly ones that simplify very complex products, and large portfolios of product suites. And, some of the hyperscalers have done a great job with that. And, telcos can learn from that. And I know, Cato Networks is an example of a company that just took that concept and basically poured their resources into building a fantastic portal.
Thank you, Beth. Well, I think we are all learning from each other as we continue to develop these partnerships. Well, we must leave it there. Thank you all very much for taking part in our discussion today and sharing all your views. And if you're watching this on day one of our summit on telcos and public cloud, then please send us your questions and we'll try and answer them in our live after show program later today. And do take part in our online poll, which you can find below this video player window next to the Q&A app. This is the question we are asking, along with the 5 multiple choice answers, and we'll review the votes during the after show. And don't forget, next month sees the return of our flagship in-person event, DSP Leaders World Forum. I hope to see you all there. For now though, thank you and goodbye.
The quality of discussion has been a really impressive level, and I hope you do it next year, and if you are, count me in.